easy to use, it's easy to deploy.
ATS is a premier IBM business partner.
When you are leveraging your data effectively, you're in a position to leverage the cloud more effectively.
Delivering you the very best in servers and storage.
Hello, 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 hello. We're doing yet another IBM podcast. Today's subject is data protection. It's actually one of two that we're doing. I encourage you to listen to the second one. We're going to be spending a little bit of time talking about some of the really unique things that are happening in the area of data protection, some of the cool things that you can be doing and you ought to be doing because they're big benefits. So we've got a great cast, crew, group together. We're going to actually walk around and introduce who we've got on the phone today.
Hey, Tim Conley, principal at ATS Group, been in data protection for 25 plus years.
Greg Tevis, I'm with Cobalt Iron and been 38 years in backup and data protection and storage.
Steve White, I am with IBM and I've had 23 years as a customer in the backup space and 10 years as an IBMer, looking at it from the other side of the house.
And I'm Tom Sullivan. I've got 35 years with IBM, focusing on data and use of data, and I run the best practices group in IBM. So today's obvious, if you hadn't heard it, it's about data protection. But besides the amount of years, we've heard 25 years, 38, 35. We got a lot of years, a lot of capital E experience. We've been working together for quite a while in terms of partnering and doing a lot of work with clients. Want to talk about that, Tim, and your relationship with Cobalt as well?
Sure. Much like Steve, I used to be a customer way back in the day for an insurance company and then joined IBM for several years and then started ATS a little over 19 years ago. And as an IBM business partner, I've been doing data protection solutions around the IBM portfolio for a long time, 19 years. Partnering with Greg and Cobalt Iron over the last couple of years, bringing some of the automation and great things that they can provide as far as solutions go around data protection.
I mean, Cobalt, you've been a global partner of ours and a great one for a really long time. And Tim, ATS, I mean, the partnership is a little bit deeper than normal. I mean, we're in your facility all the time. We do demonstrations, but you're the kind of the skills and the experience that we use quite often in this market to implement things that whether they be easy, which quite often they're not, but even the real important things, the tough ones like moving to cloud, data protection, et cetera.
Absolutely. Yeah, over the last 19 years, been partnering with IBM, and as you mentioned, we have an innovation center outside Philadelphia, so we have the ability to have infrastructure there. We can do testing, resiliency testing, DR testing for some customers that don't have the ability to do it themselves, but really what you're getting at is from an experience perspective. So we have probably over 75, 80 customers strictly around data protection solutions and pain points and, going in and helping through solutions and enhancements to their environments because, every 3, 4, 5 years, customers are redoing it. So, over 20 years, that might happen 4 times within a customer, right? So we have a lot of customers coming back to, relook at things. And in our prior podcast, we're talking about shiny new nickels and whatnot. So a lot of customers are looking at new things these days.
Yeah, I mean, you actually, one of the things that I really appreciate from the IBM side is you take the risk out of it for clients. I mean, doing anything new it's risky, right? It's new, it's risky, and there's apprehension, and you guys remove all those.
It's like there's white papers out there, which is great. Whiteboarding's pretty cool. But at the end of the day, it's all about experience, bringing what works at our other customers to our net new customers and vice versa, right? Just bringing that experience.
And Greg, you're living that too. I mean, you see that same.
Yeah, exactly. And ATS is such a great partner. I worked 36 years with IBM and I retired to join Cobalt Iron because I was so excited about what they're doing in the enterprise data protection world. And I worked with ATS from the IBM side and from Cobalt Iron. Absolutely. We just go hand in hand with the ATS group and use IBM technologies to transform customers' experiences.
Great. So I want to actually poke at experience a little bit. I mean, we're gonna take you from I don't want to say the past, but kind of like what the norm or the status quo is today to really the future. And I'll share some data points. I mean, we did a study about 5 years ago. Spent $12 million actually looking at clients' data in just tremendous amount of levels of detail. And we were focused on data protection. Let me share some data points with you. 23% of clients had no capacity planning whatsoever, which meant, I guess they were just hoping they had enough data and showed up on Monday, they didn't have it, they'd buy more, right? Probably not the best thing to be doing, but 23% no capacity planning. The really one that really scares me was 70% of customers had no data catalog. So it means they have got a lot of data, but they just have, who knows what it might be, right?
Yep.
90% had no documentation. So I guess if you left, the new guy would be on his own to figure it out for himself. That's not positive. And then the scary one is 30% of clients actually had an archive process. That's kind of frightening, because when we think about some of the new things that data protection can do, whether it be
What did you say, 30%?
30%.
Was it that high?
Well, I mean, of the 1,200 that we asked, I mean, so, but yeah, so 30% had one, which meant, let's do the math on that, 70% did not have one. So that's kind of scary, right? That's vulnerable. And by the way, this is in an environment where, data protection was easier. I'm not saying easy, but it was easier for sure, because you were backing things up on a daily basis, maybe a weekly, a monthly basis, on a year. So it was on an accounting cycle. But now there's bad people out there, that are literally trying to get at your data, whether it be on your premise or maybe you've moved to the cloud, they're trying to get theirs. So let's talk about, let's make it real. Let's talk about, some life experience where things just went bad. It's kind of negative, and then maybe share some war stories on like how things, how we save the day, So Tim, maybe.
Yeah, sure. So one of my great war stories is, dating myself, but my first DR test as a backup administrator, went to IBM Sterling Forest up in New York. Thought I had all my eggs in all ready to go. Think it was going to be a total success. Now, this is one reason why you should do DR tests, because you learn things, right? I was doing a single Oracle instance restore, started the restore, excuse me. Things are going, mounting tapes. I start doing the math. I'm like, damn, this thing's going to take 90 hours to restore a single Oracle database. I'm like, I got to go back to the drawing board. Right? Just not good.
Well, I've actually heard other plans are like, when things go bad, let's meet at the McDonald's for breakfast and figure out what we're going to do. And normally it's update my resume, because that's probably what I'm going to be doing.
Well, hold it, Tom. I got to tell Tim, I'm very impressed that he did a DR test. That's what I caught out.
That's what I'm saying.
Very rare.
So how about you? Do we get any war stories?
Oh, plenty of war stories. 3 parts of my career are pertinent to this discussion. One is I ran a whole data center by myself, including backups, for about 6 years. And then I certainly 25 years as a vendor, storage and backup products, and then delivering those. And then last 15 or 20 years, spent a lot of time in the field with customers, 100 or more year to year, every year. And yeah, a lot of experiences. One of the funniest ones that comes to my mind, Tom, is I was running a data center, and my manager, in his infinite wisdom, we had a individual that was my backup that went to another company. Wasn't a competitor. He just chose a different job. My manager went into the data center and hit the EPO button. And so I had the joy of experiencing my own DR test. Luckily, I was able to get up all my MVS and VM and Unix systems, but it took a while. So it's all about recovery and focusing on recovery.
It's funny you say the guy hit the EPO button. The big reasons why things would go bad in the past generally were it was a person, right?
Yeah.
Like the person would take the data down. That was like usually the number one. So it was user operational error. And the other big one was fire. Was another big one.
I had another good one. I came into my data center, and if you've never smelt the beauty of burning media, my head, it was an old 3350 removable platter, 300 megabytes. Wow. And boy, oh boy, that's a different smell that you don't want to have when you walk in your data center. But the head decided to plow into the media. But another DR test.
And the other big one, the third biggest was in the past, was catastrophic failure. So if you thought about it, I mean, back in the day, I mean, everything's flash these days, thank God, because things don't move. But disk drives, I mean, laws of physics, and we're placing platters really tight, and we're spinning them as fast as we can, and we got heads reading them, and something's going to go wrong. Physics will eventually catch up with you, and it normally did. And it didn't have 30% had a backup archive process, and 70 didn't. Things went bad. And you met at McDonald's and updated the resume. So, Steve, any personal war? Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of stories, but as you two noted, the biggest one is DR. It's DR testing, which we would do regularly, and that's where the pressure is, and that's where it matters.
And you learn a lot too.
And absolutely. So if folks out there aren't doing that type of thing, they're going to be in for a surprise. So you definitely have to exercise that and make sure your processes work.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like we've all got scrapes and bumps in this space. I mean, hopefully we've all had that day where we were the hero and brought the data back. So a lot of experience at the table. There's a lot going on now, though, that's changed data protection quite a bit. Let's talk about what are the big things that you're all seeing that's different out there.
Yeah, I'd say ransomware certainly is the most recent one, right? So it brings DR testing or DR planning full circle, right? Before we were always concerned about, the building's blowing up, so I got to take my stuff elsewhere, restore it. The paradigm's completely different now because you're now restoring on-prem because somebody locked their data up and you can't get at it. So either you're going to pay the ransom or you're going to try to restore your data on-prem, which typically isn't what you would design your solutions around. So it's some very interesting things we've learned in the last 4, 5, 6 months in a couple of our customers where they got hit with ransomware for multi-million-dollar penalties that they're not going to pay, and spent weeks and some in case months trying to restore data that they just weren't prepared to do that type of restore.
Yeah, I thought, Tim, that you had mentioned that had happened, and I've heard that from in the last 4 months also from another partner with another customer that got wiped out. So I think that's 3 that I know of in the last 4 months.
And the costs are astronomical. I mean, and you compare them to things like drug abuse, et cetera. I mean, it's bigger these days. And they're hitting everybody. They're like the top industries are finance. Another big one is health. But you don't hear a lot about health because they just pay the money because EMR systems are being locked up, PACS systems are being knocked down, surgery centers are being locked out. Imagine that. I mean, your life or death, situations. And then the big ones, there's probably not a retailer out there that we haven't read about recently that are getting hit. So these are people that know what they're doing, with data protection, but nonetheless, bad people are out there, and it's not really a question of when. It's actually not a question of if it's going to happen. It's a question of when it's going to happen. So ransomware, absolutely.
So, Tom, I wanted to bring up another point around your metrics. You mentioned a lot of painful-looking metrics, and to my mind, that jumped out that another issue to your next question is what's going on, what's different with backup administrators these days, and that is they're just swamped. And, whether it's trying to understand technologies, whether it's trying to deal with more data growth, more tools, more technology, more complexity. They used to be experts on 1 or 2 backups, procedures and products. Now it's like they've got dozens of products to try to control everything they're doing. And humans, for mere mortals, these guys are great and girls are great, but for mere mortals, enterprise backup's becoming almost undoable. And so that's why Cobalt Iron Compass, for instance, we focus on automation, start taking that as well as that security and some of these other major issues. But that just jumped out to me when you're reading those stats. It's like, oh boy. And it's come down to those poor storage administrators just swamped.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You bring up Compass. I've read a lot about that. It seems like a really cool product, and you can do some really unique things around automation. So talk to me why automation is important today. Why?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what I was just starting to bring up. I think the storage admin's jobs are, they're just overwhelming. You think about all the different, asset management, capacity management, performance management, all those things that you were talking about, DR plan, wow, that doesn't even trickle up to the top, 10% of priority. There's just so many tasks that can and should be automated, and they are by Compass. And so Compass takes away those administrative points and helps the brutal life of the storage administrator improve so they can focus more on business outcomes, more on their strategy, more on delivery of premier IT services.
So Compass, I mean, if you haven't looked at it, you need to look at it. It's a great product. automation is the future. It's looking at the work, anticipating the work, and actually taking action against the work. And as you said, if people are busy, it's just they're not going to do these things, and you're going to get hit and have a difficult time. So talk more about you've got a lot of experience, Tim. Talk about experience, like what your organization brings to the table to help people make choices. And one of the things you said earlier at lunch was funny. You used the term a shiny nickel, and you talked about it. And when you read brochures today, I mean, you read this stuff and you're like, wow, it does everything. This is great. It's easy, blah, blah, blah. I mean, from a person that's actually living it every day, delivering SLAs for clients, like you recognize a shiny nickel and like shiny nickels like all of us do, but you also recognize, how to poke at things and is it real or is it not real?
That's a good point, Tom. So I think taking all that experience over 20, 25 years, you've kind of learned the things that you need to know on a daily basis. What things should be operational? How do they operate? Not only for on-prem, but off-prem, and now the cloud is a big thing, right? I have a lot of customers that are going to the cloud in some form or fashion, and it's fascinating to me. If you talk to we'll call it the on-prem folks, right? And they say, I'll ask them, hey, what are you backing up in the cloud, or how are you doing that? I don't know. Those folks are just moving stuff to the cloud, and people don't have that experience. The folks that are working on cloud workload or standing up some compute, they're not concerned about the compute perspective or storage, or is it going to perform properly? Backups are absolutely the last thing they think about, and sometimes they don't even think about it. It's fascinating to me. But from an experience perspective, bringing that knowledge over 20 years to play for the customers, so we know what they should be doing, how they should be doing it. And then I think comes in handy with the shiny new nickels. So, you read through it, you understand it. Sometimes we'll test those products and really shoot holes into, what they're claimed to be. Or you have so much experience, and it's not just ATS, but, other firms and companies and even product vendors, right? You know what to ask them. And then when you get that deer in the headlight look, you kind of stumped them, and what they're pitching to you is really not what it is.
Yeah, it's funny. We use the word governance, automation, process. 30% had a process. In the past, it was on a cycle: daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. Now, if you look at data, data's everywhere. I mean, people have moved their email systems to different providers. People have moved files to different places. Not always the IT organization that's doing the movement. There's user departments actually moving the data, and things like words like SLAs, they don't know what those words are. They just know that my system's working really good in this cloud. I love it, blah, 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 but have never really read or even thought about loss of data. They just assume they never will. I mean, so that kind of talks about like multi-cloud. You probably not just one. Most customers have 5, on average, right, for those reasons. Talk to me about like working with different cloud vendors and the good parts of that, and then the things you need to think about from a data protection perspective as well.
That's a good question, Tom. So many customers are doing multi-cloud things, and some of them call their own stuff private cloud. So that might be one of them. Then you have your major vendors, right? So a lot of the products, the shiny new nickels we're seeing out there, are vendors that are taking, like, say, AWS services that are available in our catalog and just putting a wrapper around it, right? Sometimes they're good, right? Because Amazon doesn't give you clear-cut solutions. They just give you parts and pieces, and they count on you to go do that, which is kind of interesting. That's how it used to be 25 years ago, right? Things matured on-prem. Now in the cloud world, they're giving you parts and pieces. We're going back to where we used to be, to have to tie these things together and make them solutions. So some of these shiny new nickels are good because they're taking those disparate parts and pieces from these cloud vendors and putting them into a nice little wrapper that you can actually consume. And then multi-cloud stuff is important because you just brought up a great point, right? So I have one customer that has, like, say, an HPC grid. So it's not the infrastructure folks that are deciding where to put that. It's the application folks. Right. I'm taking my grid to the cloud. They're not even talking to the on-prem infrastructure folks or other folks that may have moved things to Amazon or Azure or something like that. They're moving their stuff maybe to Google, right? So you're right. There's a lot of disparate things happening within an organization to move to different clouds. So you got to tie those things together.
Greg, what's your experience in this?
Yeah, that's one of the major focuses, and one of the many benefits of Compass is that doesn't matter where that data is. It could be in the cloud. It could be on premise. It could be file systems. It could be NAS devices. It could be high performance computing data mines. The backup of those workloads is experienced through a single unified interface, which is a Compass Commander. So, yeah, it's a new experience. That's part of that business outcomes. The focus of Compass is really to deliver a way to get your arms around all those things, the data and data protection and the operations and the infrastructure needed to protect it. All that sort of just gets automated and delivered as a service, and that's part of the many values of Compass.
Now let's talk about some really positive things that we're seeing as well, and some real leadership that we're all witnessing and actually executing on. Let's see. We'll poke at you a little bit. Analytics and reuse of data. What excites you about those things?
Well, I mean, as the the application folks, and the evolution too is the roles, right? The hats. Who has the hat? Who has the backup hat? Who has the so VMware, it's been around, for forever. So, everybody's protecting it. Everybody, has their hands in it. But who are you going to relinquish the power to control that? The VM admins, they could create stuff. But when you look at the old production support, and that control over, making sure everything, the service levels are met, retention policies are met, that kind of gets really muddied when you get all these different hands doing things on their own.
That's a good point.
I would think too, like the VM was really hot. When people first began to support that, everybody's like, "Oh, this is the greatest thing." It was solving a lot of problems, but it's kind of a check in the box. But every product has that. Everybody's doing that. That's nothing awesome. I mean, it's the automation, it's the governance work, the analytics, the reuse of data. That's really where this has shifted to. So.
Yeah. I think, like Steve was saying, when you start having those different environments and businesses start losing control of what's happening, and what I call data governance, data discipline, that sort of slips away. You mentioned VMware. Same thing with cloud, right? It's
containers.
Container. And it's like, okay, everyone's doing a little thing here, a little thing there. It's like, hold it, everyone stop. Because at the same time, we have this massive security exposures and risks that are growing that we talked about earlier. How do you get your arms around that? And that's really what Compass is trying to do, give you a first-rate premier IT service for your enterprise backup. You automate the painful operations and tasks that an administrator has to do. You do it for workloads wherever they exist. You do it in a multi-cloud environment. You add deep layers of security, so you not only reduce the risk of security exposures, you eliminate them, because we close down with Compass that access to backup servers, to operating systems, to storage devices. So all of those things are combined and delivered as a service, which has really been a focus of Cobalt Iron Compass.
So if that were to say, I love it, I want it, like, talk to me about a Compass experience. I purchased a product. How do I buy it? And then how do I start getting the benefits that we're talking about?
So I'll jump in here and I'll pull in my
this is definitely meant to
Steve and Tim's, because the Compass experience is very different than any backup or storage product that people and vendors consume and sell. Why I say that is the experience is about successful business outcomes, and that's not just leading up. That successful business outcome doesn't end at the sale. That's the beginning of the beauty of the Compass experience. Why do I say that? It's because Compass is automated software as a service platform delivering enterprise backup. It's monitoring, it's analyzing 24 hours a day. It's optimizing for workloads constantly. Any backup product or storage product is really pretty static if you look at it, unless it's being someone has to go in and configure it to do something different. Compass is a service that's automatically adjusting itself, automatically having every day or every 2 weeks actually having new analytics put into it, having additional automation put into it, having best practices. Any optimizations are happening on an ongoing basis.
So when you say monitoring, so is it doing heat maps against the data, like looking at like the high use data, the non-use data,
that's one of many things it does. It's looking at monitoring the entire backup infrastructure, and the backup operations. So that includes operating systems that are running, backup tooling software that's running, Compass itself, storage devices, compute devices, cloud services. All of those things are being monitored for health, performance, capacity, and any other indications like ransomware activity or indications. That's happening constantly. Tom, I didn't answer your question back on what's the experience with the customer. So Cobalt Iron Compass goes hand in hand with IBM, the IBM team and IBM Technologies, and with ATS as our partner. And the experience is that the customer, we will sit down, understand, I think Tim was mentioning this earlier, sit down, understand the customer's environment, understand what their strategies are, their service level requirements, their networks, their existing resources, people resources, and their strategies, what their cloud strategy is, for example. And then we design and configure and deliver Compass for that. And we go hand in hand with ATS. And that experience is ongoing. It doesn't end at the sale. It just begins. Compass starts monitoring all the time. And Compass is the best friend of any customer.
Yeah, I'd jump in there and say, like, from our perspective, we talked about shiny new nickels quite a bit today, right? So we have a backup as a service as a company, and have probably over 18, 19, 20 customers doing over about 12,000, 13,000 nodes backing up daily. So again, that experience allows us to do that. It's a great piece of line of business for us, but automation became key. You know, I can go hire 20 more people, but that's really not the business I want to be in, right? I want to be able to automate. So when we were starting to look at shiny new nickels for our own consumption, that's how we came across Cobalt Iron, started looking into it. And again, it's that experience about asking questions of the vendor and getting great responses. You clearly knew right up front, they knew what they were talking about. So that's why we decided to partner with these guys over the last couple of years, and it's one of our go-to solutions that we're bringing to our customers, because it is a shiny new nickel that actually works, which is key for us for our backups as a service and other solutions we're trying to pitch to our customers, including the newest and latest great stuff with the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, you're an ex-customer, so you appreciate the value. You're a user of the product, so and a person using it that has to deliver the SLAs. Because if you don't deliver the SLAs, you don't get paid, right? So, in fact, it impacts your business quite a bit. So that's a nice endorsement.
I think customer satisfaction is the reason we're in business. We have 100% customer satisfaction. It might sound kind of yeah, right, that's not possible, but it is. I mean, we haven't lost a customer due to performance. So customers choose us and stay with us because of that. So when we're out looking for solutions, we got to pick the right one, because I can't afford to lose customers.
And it's not just about losing customers too. You've got a long-term history, like 18 plus years with these clients. So it's a long tenure. Now, Steve, I mean, obviously, like, what we're motivated from an IBM perspective is we want to obviously protect the data, right? We want to keep the bad guys out. And then we really want to take it to the next level. And, if you haven't evaluated data protection recently, you got to look at IBM products. You got to look at our partners like ATS, Cobalt Iron, because we're doing some really extraordinary things with data and protecting it. And the two of those things have actually merged. We did a study of CEOs years ago, in fact, not years ago, recently, and there are 15 things that they talked about in terms of data. Like, ranking number one on the list of CEOs was, I want to know my customers, which means I want to understand my customers from a data perspective. Number one on their list. Reuse of data is shockingly, of the 15, was ranked 13th, 14th. So you think that kind of doesn't make sense. Wouldn't that be connected, right? And, the things that we're doing now at IBM is, in addition to inclusiveness, working with any vendor, working with any cloud, working with any type of information, whether it be files, containers, unstructured data, et cetera. It's inclusive. Like, we want to actually bring data and data protection to the next level. So we'll conclude on what I'm going to recommend you doing, from my experience, is reach out to ATS. They're going to walk you through an experience that will make you comfortable, reduce the agita, the risk of making a decision, and then bring the benefits that data protection solutions that come from IBM and Cobalt Iron now provide to you. Tim, why don't we actually just finish on that? Talk about, they make that phone call to you all, and what happens? Like, what's...
Yeah, great question. I'd say it's a very easy experience. Give us a call. As Tom mentioned, we'll bring you through our process and procedure. Very easy to do. We've been doing this a long time, so we know things what to talk about, what to cut to the chase, what are your pain points, and what are you really looking to achieve. I think a lot of our customers, maybe every one of them, and I'm not really kidding about this, are not overly happy with their data protection solutions today. A lot of it's self-inflicted pain points, either budgets they don't put the time and effort and money into the infrastructure they have today, or maybe they're just going through backup administrators, so you never really have that skill, and skills being diminished in the industry as far as backup and recovery go. So again, give us a call. We'll go through that. It's very easy to go through that. And again, we're bringing experience of not just white paper stuff that sounds pretty cool. We're bringing solutions that work for customers that are very much like yourself.
I think Greg, you kind of touched on it. Like, people are hesitating to take that leap because the lack of skills, the lack of experience. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure your data is protected. It's the most important thing in your enterprise. In fact, it's rated as more important and more valuable than gold and oil these days. So data is where it's at. But more importantly, you want to take advantage of what modern data protection solutions can afford to you. And you want to take advantage of the things that make your life easier. I mean, the automation, the governance, the decisioning that you can't possibly make regardless of how many people you have, or your skills. I mean, let's automate and modernize this. So with that, I want to thank the panel, and I want to encourage you, those that are listening, to reach out and talk to people with an awful lot of experience and can bring benefits very quickly to any organization.
The story is in the data. This is Storage Stories Podcast. Thanks for listening.